Down with the Green Deal is the main demand and slogan with which Labour Solidarity will demonstrate in Warsaw on the 10th of May. Poles will lose up to half their income as a result of the Green Deal provisions. This is the death for our economy, but also for very many Polish workers, not only in the mining or metallurgical sector, for it concerns every Pole. Because the Green Deal only partly concerns agriculture. It's a project for the European Union countries to achieve zero carbon economies. The problem is that Brussels want to impose restrictions by force, for example by banning the use of older cars. But that's just for starters. The European Union's goal is also to ban the sale of new cars and vans with internal combustion and diesel engines by 2035. This is also a big cash heist. There will be a need to renovate apartments, houses. It will make everything more expensive. On Friday, the European Council, without any objection from the Polish government, adopted a directive on the energy performance of buildings which stipulates, among other things, that by 2030 all new buildings must be zero emission, and by 2050 this is applied to all buildings. By 2040 all fossil fuel boilers in residential buildings are to be phased out, to be replaced by photovoltaic installations. Think you'll miss out on costly thermal upgrades at the green counter? It is estimated that up to 83% of buildings in Poland may be subject to it, and the cost to Poles will be more than 1.5 trillion zloty. We invite everyone. It's an apolitical march. It's a march against the craziness behind the Green Commune. As party chairman Jarosław Kaczyński pointed out, Poland especially now needs to unite in the face of threats posed by European Union policies. Today is such a time when there is nothing to divide. Please, you have to be together. Solidarity has announced that it is launching a campaign to collect signatures for a referendum on the rejection of the European Union Green Deal. The referendum question will be announced within days. This is an issue that should unite everyone regardless of views. Every citizen will be affected by this regulation that will affect our cars, our homes, our daily lives. The European Union is not consistent in its policies. Farmers remind us that further restrictions on agriculture, for example bans on the use of pesticides, are openly at odds with the agreements to import goods from Ukraine. These are much cheaper because there are no restrictions or regulations on food production in Ukraine. So, my farm is supposed to limit breeding, production and competition, for example, with holdings that are in the east in Ukraine, which have several or tens of thousands of hectares, each after all. Is this logical? The European Union has made apparent concessions to the Green Deal in the agricultural sector. Cezary Krzysztof believes. For example, on the issue of fallowing, absolutely apparent, it nevertheless insists on implementing the Green Deal. Well, then we also somewhat will ignore their governorship in Warsaw, which apparently has little to say on the matter. Our response will also be canny. On the 10th of May, the march will set off from in front of the Royal Palace. Then the protesters will march in front of the headquarters of the European Commission representation in Warsaw. It will end in front of the Polish Parliament. Let's stop this madness together. We will see you at the 10th of May demonstration in Warsaw. Łukasz Szmuda, TV Republika.
The rockets and drones exploding in front of Israelis may be impressive outside the expert community, but Tehran warns that it was only a mild response to the attack on the Iranian diplomatic facility in Damascus. This was only a warning. If Israel retaliates, our response will be more forceful. According to unofficial reports, Israel is preparing for another attack on Iran. Retaliation could lead to a regional war. The Biden administration this past weekend made an ironclad pledge to further protect Israel. The topic of an Iranian attack on Israel was taken up at the UN.
If Iran or its proxies take actions against the United States or further action against Israel, Iran will be held responsible.
Israel's air defense system is called the Iron Dome for a reason. It is one of the most effective interceptor systems in the world. It is a missile defense system that protects Israel from short-range light missiles, mainly mortars or simple rockets that Hamas or Hezbollah launch at cities and critical infrastructure facilities within the Israeli state itself.
w samym państwie izraelskim.
The Middle East has been the most unstable part of the world since the mid-20th century. The causes of the many conflicts are unchanged: religious fundamentalism and disparities in the distribution of oil and gas resources. According to Israel, Iran is a nuclear power, which Israel believes will threaten security in the region. German experts warn that the conflict could even reach a global scale. In such an event, Poland, as a NATO member country, would also be threatened by Iran. The U.S. and the West as a whole are planning to contain their emotions, as they fear that Netanyahu will take the opportunity to strike elements of Iran's nuclear program, which would lead to a radical escalation of the entire conflict in the region, and possibly a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, but most likely also more attacks on Israel itself. A potential attack from Iran was warned against as early as 1983 by U.S. President Ronald Reagan. In 2008, Poland could be included in the U.S. missile shield. The former president, George Bush, was determined to deploy the system in Poland. Paradoxically, it was Donald Tusk who was against it. I will say one more thing that I will not say publicly. When I was in Russia, I managed to thaw relations. This is what we wanted. However, it cost something. It was not an easy task, and everything was fine until we brought up the subject of missile defense. Do you know what Putin said? He suddenly became very anxious, looked me in the eye, and said, "Okay, you want missile defense? Fine. But the next day I will direct my missiles with nuclear warheads at targets in Poland." Russia has missiles aimed at the U.S. Putin has already threatened the U.S., and he knows that if he fires one missile at an ally, we will blow them away. He knows that missile defense is not aimed at Russia. He is simply trying to threaten you. The unsettled situation in the world is due to the fact that Russia, and especially China, are trying to undermine the dominance of the United States on the international stage. A double game is being played by Germany, which can benefit from a possible change in the balance of power. Part of this game is today's visit by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to Shanghai, during which he will negotiate the terms of economic cooperation. Berlin is lobbying for the creation of a joint European army and a European missile shield, where it would lead the way. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk spoke about new prospects for international domination. Europe must become the strongest political entity in the world because it has all capabilities to do so. We are economically, financially, technologically, in terms of population, bigger and stronger than the United States and Russia combined. Experts are divided over this statement. When asked if it was an attempt to undermine the position of the U.S. in Europe, this is how they responded. Was it about building strategic autonomy, namely an attempt to indicate that Europe would like to be strategically autonomous, that is, to have its own subjectivity and its own possibility of possible interventions, or to become a regional power? Russia and the U.S. cannot be left together because the U.S. is our ally and Russia is our threat. In the last 8 years in Poland, a number of contracts were signed for the purchase of armaments that launched a revolution in the Polish air defense system. Likewise, the construction of the missile shield only started under the United Right government, 8 years later than the Americans expected.
Ukraine has delivered 3 times more drones to its armed forces so far this year than in the whole of 2023. A top commander said as Ukrainian forces accelerate the use of unmanned aircraft in the war against Russia. In 2024, we have delivered 3 times more drones than in the past year. This process continues and will only grow. Were they predominantly made in Ukraine? 99% of them were made in Ukraine. It's no secret that our resource limitations in artillery are compensated for by drones, such as FPVs, and bomber drop drones, and heavy combat drones which can work at night, such as multi-rotor drones and fixed-wing drones. This is our advantage which we use and expand. Ukraine, which has been fighting off a full-scale Russian invasion for nearly 26 months, is seeking to ramp up its domestic arms manufacturing and the use of innovative technologies to compete against its much larger and wealthier enemy. As the Ukrainian military is outgunned and outmanned on the battlefield, Moscow's forces have been increasing pressure along the entire front line and making gradual gains. The increased use of drones by both sides has been shifting the conflict away from the battlefield to strikes on each other's military, energy and transport infrastructure. Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, used to hit targets inside Russia in recent months, can now hit targets more than 1,200 kilometers away. Alexander Kimishin, Ukraine's Minister of Strategic Industries, said Ukrainian weapons manufacturers had fueled both military and economic progress in the country. Yes, we don't have enough money to place orders matching production capacity, but we are working on it together with defense forces and we are looking for additional funds. We're cooperating with several international partners to start financing the purchase of Ukrainian defense products. You know that there are countries buying defense products in third countries for us, but I am convinced that we will start purchases from Ukrainian manufacturers with foreign funds in the near future. Ukraine's booming military-industrial complex grew GDP by 1.5% in 2023, a significant chunk of the total GDP growth last year of around 5%. Kamishin said he was confident that figure would double to 3% of GDP growth this year, but he warned Ukraine's government could not afford to buy up all its domestic weapons production. Donald Trump appeared at a Manhattan courthouse an hour before the scheduled trial date. This one begins with the selection of 18 jurors and could take several months. This is a political prosecution. This is an attack on America. That's why I'm proud to be here, the former United States president said, adding that President Joe Biden is very much involved in the case against him. Donald Trump and his lawyers say that due to the dominance of Democratic voters in New York, the former president has no chance of a fair trial in Manhattan and are seeking a change of venue. The New York trial is the first of 4 criminal charges filed against the Republican candidate in this year's elections. In the polls, Donald Trump maintains a lead over his challenger, Joe Biden.